Hi everyone, my name is Sarah. I used to be a student at the University of Surrey from 2016 to 2019, where I studied criminology. I was then your Vice President Support in the Students' Union from 2019 to 2020 until COVID hit, and I am currently helping with the implementation of a mental health support system in Beirut, Lebanon. So we all have mental health, the same way that we all have physical health. Some people may have poorer mental health, some people may have better mental health, but it is something that is present in every single one of us, the same way that we all have physical health. However, for mental well-being, that is very different, because I believe that goes to a particular state of mind that you would have if someone is feeling if there are more emotions of happiness, of joy, of stability, that would all encourage a certain mental well-being. It is very important as well not to confuse mental well-being with illnesses, because you can have a diagnosable mental illness and still be having feelings of mental well-being. Just because you have a certain diagnosis doesn't mean that you aren't allowed to feel happiness, that you aren't allowed to feel stability, that you aren't allowed to feel joy or any such emotions. So yeah, I believe mental well-being is a particular state of mind where you are feeling content with yourself. As you can see on the graph here, it explains quite clearly the concept of mental well-being and how it differs from mental illness. Essentially, it is showing that you can have a diagnosis of a mental illness and still feel happiness. So you can be diagnosed with anxiety and still feel joy. You can be diagnosed with schizophrenia and still feel happiness and content and other such emotions. So I think that's really important to remember, that having poor mental well-being and having a mental illness is very different. Obviously, being diagnosed with a mental illness comes with its own complications, but it is not mutually exclusive of having good or better mental well-being. And I think that's really important to remember when we think about mental well-being. So if you're out there and you have a diagnosis, it's okay, you can still be happy and it can still be better, and you can go up above that bar and things will be okay. Tips for improving mental well-being. There's no magic trick. It's not like if when you break your leg, you can put it in a cast and everything will be fine in a couple of weeks. Improving mental health really requires a lot of energy from the individual, and I think that is something that is usually it's something that is hard to understand, because providing that level of energy to help yourself is already hard when you are feeling okay. But if you already are if you already have low mood, or you already have poor mental well-being, then it becomes so much harder. This is a really hard one, because this really depends on every individual and what works better for you and what doesn't work better for you. But as a general rule, a general consensus, I would say talking. Whether that be talking to your support system, or talking therapy, or talking to a stranger on their phone, for example, Samaritans. I do believe that vocalizing emotions and putting words into those feelings is one of the hardest steps there is, because you have to understand what you're feeling and you have to try and put it into words, and sometimes it's very hard to understand what is happening inside your head. So I think, yeah, the first tip I would say, the first part of improving your mental well-being would be to vocalize how you're feeling. Secondly, try and find support that is the most appropriate for you. Some people will benefit more from group therapy, some people will benefit more from one-to-one therapy. It really depends on you as an individual, what works better for you. But there is no harm in trying. You do need to be proactive about your own mental health, which I think is why it's so hard as well to be able to obtain that level of mental well-being, that square root I was talking about earlier, being that upper right corner, upper left corner, because it requires so much energy from the individual to be able to put yourself out there. And when I say that, I mean going to a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, starting meds, and going to the hospital, going to group therapy. There are so many different ways that can help someone in getting better, but it does require a level of energy and motivation and dedication from that particular individual. And I think that is why it's so hard to get out of it, and it's so hard to explain to explain it to someone who hasn't experienced it. Supporting someone with poor mental health. This one is really, really important, and is also really, really hard. It's a bit like when you go on a plane and they tell you to put your own mask on before putting the mask on someone else. Helping a friend with poor mental health is kind of like that. You need to check in with yourself. Are you capable of taking this on board? Can you hear the story? Can you, do you have the mental capacity and the mental energy to be able to support this? And it's okay to not be able to, even if it's your partner, even if it is a family member, even if it is your childhood friend. It is okay not to be in a position to be able to help. And at the end of the day, it is not necessarily your responsibility. It is important to be there for your friends. I'm not trying to say the opposite, but this is why we have professional therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists who are there, because that is their jobs. And I do believe boundaries are very, very important. So even if you are trained, even if you're studying psychology now and you have a high level of understanding, does not mean it's your responsibility. And the most you can do for someone is being there by telling them a resource they can access, by being a shoulder for them to cry on if they need to, and by educating yourself on what it means. So for example, if you know what kind of illnesses they have, educate yourself on that. Or if it's just a monthly mood, understand what that means, and understand what you can do as a friend. This is a very tricky one because I wouldn't say I have one per se. When we talk about self-care routines, I do think they are recurrent things. So running, music, cooking, talking to friends, those are very recurrent. And I personally do some of those. I don't have a go-to one. It's just depending my mood, depending where I am, depending what's happening and what is making me feel low. However, it is really, really important to remember that these self-care routines are good only if you are feeling low, not if you are feeling critical, in which case you need to seek a stronger support most likely from a professional. So self-care routines are good, but it's important to remember that you cannot just slap on a face mask and everything will be okay. It's about having that balance. It's when you're feeling frustrated and maybe a bit angry, go for a run. That really helps me, at least. I blow off some steam and it takes me time to think and not make a rational decision. But then that's not going to cure depression. And I do think there is an important line to draw, and it's important to know the balance between both of them. I would give my past self. I haven't actually thought about this in a long, long time. I used to think about questions like this quite often, but I haven't. So this kind of puts me on the spot, but in a good way. I do think reflecting on your own mental health is always good, and reflecting on the progress you've made and the journey you've had so far is always important. I would tell my past self to stop running away from my problems. No one knows what I'm going through but me. As much as I can talk about it, as much as I can express to others how I'm feeling, and don't get me wrong, that's such an important part. At the end of the day, no one can help you but you. And I think it's very important to understand that if something's not right for you, just stop doing it. No one really understands what you're going through except yourself. It is really important to be able to reflect back on your journey, and you forget how happy you can be, and that should be your motivation. And when I heard that, it was very much, I don't know, it made me think, and I don't even remember it. I don't even think that person remembers telling that to me. But if anyone here is listening to this, then please try and remember how you felt when you were happy. I couldn't remember that. It just was so foreign and so far away. But now I do. I think all in all, the advice I'm trying to give, and sorry for all the little tangents, is believe in yourself. Believe that you can get better, and that it is a journey, and that it will be hard, and that you will go down again before you go back up. But if you cling on to that feeling of wanting to be better, someday you will. Because you're a strong cookie and you will get out of it. But yeah, I believe in you and you've got this.